You're listening to the Healing from CPTSD podcast. My name is Justin Vanderwind, and I am your host. In today's episode, I'm going to be talking about how it's okay to blame your abuser. If you haven't done so already, be sure to visit our website at healingfromcptsd.com and sign up on our email list for regular updates, as well as a free weekly newsletter. While you're at it, check out our new YouTube channel and subscribe for regular video content. If you're interested in taking your life back from CPTSD and narcissistic abuse, the Healing from CPTSD course is now available on our YouTube channel completely free of charge. This course is some of the best tools and strategies for understanding and overcoming CPTSD in your life. Feel free to check it out. And if you feel inclined to share your story at all or talk about your experiences dealing with CPTSD or narcissistic abuse with me on the podcast, I would love to have you on the show sometime. Just shoot me an email at justin@healingfromcptsd.com and we can set something up. All links will be in the description below. All right, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Healing from CPTSD. My name is Justin Vanderwind, and I am your host. So, as you can see from the title of this episode, I wanted to talk a little bit about today about how it's okay to blame your abuser. You know, I really wanted to kind of spend a whole episode talking about blame and blaming your abuser and blaming people because, you know, if you've, heard me mention this before, I've mentioned it many times, I've done a decent amount of work in the area of personal development, and part of that means I've gone to different workshops and dealt with different coaches and all this type of stuff, and even, more spiritual guides and stuff. And, the truth is you hear a lot about how, and also from just everyday people, right, how you shouldn't blame people. And I just can't believe it. Like, to me, I see and hear a lot of crazy things in this world, and not blaming someone who actually did something terrible or wrong or painful or abusive is just completely insane to me. To me, it's completely insane. And I just wanted to talk about it a little bit, and I wanted to kind of validate people who have been abused, and especially by a narcissist or someone who likes to play a lot of mind games and mental and emotional manipulation. Because it's confusing. When you've been abused by someone, and then someone else comes along and says something like, "Well, don't blame them," or don't be, stay stuck in blame because it holds you back or it's disempowering or anything. I just completely disagree, and especially for people who have dealt with narcissistic abuse, and as we know, a big deal of narcissistic abuse is gaslighting, right? And trying to mess with your brain, your head, and your thoughts, and really like manipulating your perceptions of reality, and so for me, if those words came out of a narcissist's mouth, well, don't blame me. That is just one more way to gaslight somebody who really needs to be seen and heard and validated, not only for the incredible pain and damage that, they've been through and that they probably continue to struggle with. But when you say something like that to someone, don't blame someone who's actually done something wrong, it's completely confusing. I mean, I would argue it's completely confusing for everyone. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And the main reason I say that is because, first of all, we need, and because when you say don't blame someone who actually needs to be blamed, where blame needs to be placed, it's kind of like saying, what they did isn't a big deal, just get over it, it's no big deal. But they're also saying your pain is no big deal, your feelings are no big deal, your perception of reality is perhaps wrong or twisted or something. You shouldn't blame them, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter what they do to you or how they treated you or how it made you feel or how it impacted you or how it impacted your ability to live your life. You shouldn't blame them because, you just shouldn't. To me, it has always sounded like something a 3-year-old would say after getting caught with their hand in the cookie jar. You know what I'm saying? Like, in fact, don't all criminals say something similar when they get caught? Don't blame me. Well, why shouldn't we blame you? You did it, right? Yeah, but, that was the past, so you shouldn't blame me. It's just utterly ridiculous, and I honestly think it's just a way for a manipulator to try to, use one more manipulative tactic to avoid being held accountable for their horrible behavior and how they've treated someone or how they've treated you. And, I kind of wanted to talk a little bit also about the idea that somehow people say this stuff. Even Tony Robbins says this stuff. I hear this kind of talk all the time. And I don't, especially, I think there's a lot of coaches out there, like personal development coaches, who are good people and are doing good stuff. But I don't think, I mean, in my experience anyway, with a lot of the coaches I've seen, a lot of them don't seem to really focus on emotional healing and emotional trauma and stuff like that. They just kind of want to like gloss over anything like that might have happened and just focus on creating your life today. Well, I just think my opinion is that's not the right way to go about it. Personal development is about loving yourself and healing yourself and working on yourself. I mean, a lot of us are having trouble moving forward and setting goals and working on those goals specifically because of unresolved trauma and pain that we're dealing with. To me, there is nothing more important than love and validation of someone and your experiences and what you've been through. And yes, processing trauma. Processing trauma is huge. We need to process the trauma, anything that has traumatized you in your life. It doesn't matter how big or small it is, or if someone thinks it's just not a big deal. That's just the world we live in. We live in this really traumatizing world where most people are just sort of ignoring it and dissociating from it and suppressing it, and then of course projecting it, right? I really don't like that idea. I think we need to be, because let's say I think that we've all lived, again, this is a very traumatic world. And I think that even if you haven't gone through something like narcissistic abuse, you probably have dealt with some kind of traumatic stuff in your life. And if you haven't, you probably will in the future, right? So I think it's important for everyone to be validated about their pain and their trauma and know how to process it in a healthy way, regardless if you have to process past trauma or you need to have the tools available to process trauma that comes to you down the line, right? I hear people say, well, just move on. The past is the past. The past, yeah, but that's very invalidating for trauma. You got to understand, and I don't think, from what I've heard, a lot of people don't seem to understand this, but your brain is wired to compartmentalize trauma in any traumatic event that happens in your life. And what happens is, to survive, like if we go back 1,000 years and we're being chased by some kind of wild animal in the woods or something, it's traumatic, but the rest of our brain has to keep functioning so that we can survive and get out of that situation, right? Well, the problem is if a lot of trauma happens to someone repeatedly over and over, your brain, the different neural connections in your brain sort of collapse around the actual trauma, like it's like an energy, and then it kind of like suppresses it back in the back of your brain. So you have to sort of release that trauma. And a lot of time, all you really need to do to release trauma is look at it consciously, or just when I say look at it, I just mean become aware of it, conscious of it, like bring it to the forefront of your conscious mind, which is generally what therapists are supposed to be doing for people. They're supposed to be sort of like a mirror to help you unearth the stuff that might be in unconscious to you right now so that you can process it. You can do it by talking to people, right? Being vulnerable and speaking about a traumatic event. And, because usually what'll happen is when you bring a traumatic event to the conscious part of your mind, the emotions come along with it, right? So it's a release. It's all about bringing the unconscious to, sort of the light of your awareness, your consciousness, and then releasing it in some way, right? As you know, I say this all the time, writing is really the best way as far as I'm concerned, writing about traumatic memories specifically, because it's much easier to bring. By the way, writing is, you can do it on your own, and your brain will feel much safer, right? It's easier to process stuff when you're by yourself because you don't have to feel on guard. Even with a therapist, you don't have to feel like embarrassed about perhaps maybe crying or breaking down or something. Your guards can be let down, and again, using the logic side of your brain when you're writing, you're using a pen. You're using the logic side of your brain when you're writing about emotional issues. You're allowing emotional stuff to come to the logic side of the brain where it can be looked at and processed consciously. For me, it's that combination of using your left brain, your right brain, and writing emotional stuff out on paper. it's to me, in my experience, to be honest with you, there's just no better way to actually process trauma, or to process any emotions that are within you. The pen, that's why they say the pen is mightier than the sword. I know. And so, there's going to be some mental resistance, but, that's the best way to process your trauma. So I know we went on a little tangent here because we're supposed to be talking about blame. But anyway, it's all related. And, we need to, instead of, the point is, instead of telling people they don't need to blame their abuser, I think we need to reverse that completely. I think we need to place blame where blame is due. And also, what I was going to say earlier was, there seems to be this idea in the personal development world, and I hear it everywhere, and I've always just disagreed with it, like just completely. It's mainly because I've done the complete opposite of what they've said, and it has worked for me. That's what I mean. I don't know what I think some people just hear stuff and they just kind of repeat it like a parrot. They just think it sounds good, so they just keep saying it. Hey, don't stay stuck in blame. But first of all, I think you can do whatever you want, right? Like if people also say, oh, don't hold a grudge against your nasty grandma. Well, first of all, I can hold a grudge if I want to, as long as I want. It's my, it's like if someone abuses you, the way you deal with it, the way you process that trauma, whether or not you choose to hold a grudge or not hold a grudge, or forgive them or not forgive them, that's your choice. And you should have the right to do whatever you want in response to that behavior that they did to you. Whatever you want, right? Like, don't have them in your life, move away, never talk to them. You can do whatever you want. I don't, I want to respect people's ability to actually practice their free will in response to how shitty they've been treated by other people. You can hold it. I don't care. I don't know why people say that. It's like, because to me, it's more like guilt. It's especially when you're dealing with family, like toxic family. They're like, well, don't hold a grudge against your mom or your dad or your grandma or your aunt. Because they just want you to, what they want is they want you to be okay with the abuse, right? They want you to be okay with the abuse, but it's interesting. They're not okay with the blame that you have for them, but they're okay with being able to abuse you, right? And apparently everyone else is too. All these other, enabling, invalidating people who say don't blame them or don't, or just let the past be the past. That's all extremely invalidating, and it's belittling of someone's experiences and what could be extreme pain and trauma. So, people say, like, if you stay in the consciousness of blame, you can't move forward in life. I don't know what they're talking about. To me, I just, again, it just hasn't been my experience. I blame my mother for what she did to me, the pain she caused me, and the incredible amount of damage that she caused, and really, effing up my life to an extreme extent. I mean, that literally happened. And it took an incredible amount of time and energy and focus, and to like put the rest of my life on hold just to get myself to ground zero with how much damage she actually caused, right? To say things like, well, just let the past be the past and just move on. That all sounds great and fine and dandy. But when it's like if someone breaks your legs, you got to heal the legs before you can move on. And that's what a lot of people don't understand when it comes to something like CPTSD and really intense emotional and psychological trauma, is that it's really difficult to navigate life in the world when you're broken. I mean, honest to God, like that's just the most simplistic way of saying it. We're broken. We need to be healed, right? It's like, again, if you're trying to walk on a broken leg, it's going to hurt. A, it's going to hurt. It's going to be hard to do. And B, you're going to just damage yourself more. So blame. Me blaming my mother for what she did, it had nothing to do with my ability to go to personal development workshops. It had nothing to do with my ability to heal. It had nothing to do, you know what I'm saying? So that's what I mean. Like, I think if you, the only thing I would say is if you stay stuck in blame to the point where you don't take any responsibility towards healing it, yeah, that could be a problem. But you can not take, you can be inactive and not take responsibility for your own healing and growth, whether you're blaming somebody else or not. I just think that part of the healing journey is placing blame where it's due, because and the other thing is, like, we've got to unwind our minds from so much gaslighting and brainwashing and garbage that to me, to say don't blame someone who actually did something wrong is just another form of gaslighting, right? So that's why I've gotten to the point where I like, it's easier for me to unwind my mind to just call things as they are, right? Like that's kind of my secret sauce. Some people have said, because I've gotten good with being able to spot people's crap, like not, go along with it, or if someone tries to get me in an argument or something, I can point out people's bad behavior if I need to, or not allow them to be manipulative. I know how to kind of like jujitsu my way around that stuff, so it just doesn't work. And people are like, wow, some people are like, wow, you've got some, maybe you should be a lawyer or something. You've got some great points, you've got good critical thinking skills. And my secret is, it's not like I'm a genius. I'm just looking at what's actually happening, right? A narcissist is always going to be talking about stuff that's not even happening, right? They just create all this stuff in their head and then just project it outward and create all this like, imaginary drama and BS. And, most of the time stuff isn't even happening. Like what they're talking about, it's just delusional stuff. And then that's part of the vicious inner critic is we worry, but we worry about stuff that isn't actually happening. And that's because we've dealt with narcissists, because they're just constantly in a state of panic and worry and crisis. And so they just kind of gave that to us and conditioned our brains that way. And now that's kind of how we operate. So I just think that, the focus should be our healing. And I think that blaming the people who hurt you and putting blame where it actually belongs is actually part of the healing process. That's my opinion. That's my experience with my own healing. What I would say is, as I process and grieve more, my anger, the deep levels of anger and even hatred towards my mother has sort of alleviated. And when I learned how to get my emotional needs met, because when you're dealing with a narcissistic mother specifically, you're trying to get, on the one hand, you want them to stop abusing you, and on the other hand, you want them to start like giving you love. When you're dealing with a narcissist, you're not getting love and you're getting abuse. So it's like, it's like a double whammy. And so part of my anger was how she treated me, but also it was because I wasn't getting any love from my own mother, or any other member of my family for that matter. And so my emotional needs for love and for validation and to be kept safe and to be valued, they weren't giving that to me. But once I learned how to do that for myself, a lot of the anger and resentment towards my mother kind of dissipated, because I now knew what my inner needs were and I knew how to get them, whether she or anyone else was giving that to me or not. And that was very empowering too, because I realized directly I don't need anyone else. I literally don't need anyone. Forget about their approval. I don't need love or care or validation from anyone outside of myself at all, because I know how to do that for myself now and keep myself safe and to stand up for myself when need be. But, so the anger has kind of dissipated, but I still blame her. I still doesn't make it doesn't make any sense to me. It's like a criminal who, like, let's say someone murdered somebody. Like, you're blamed. I'm blaming you for what you did. I'm not blaming you for what you didn't do, but I'm blaming you for what you did because you did it, right? I mean, that's how I see it. I can forgive you or not forgive you, but like, you're always going to be blamed. If blame was such a problem for you, you shouldn't have done the crime in the first place, right? Like, I don't get it. And not only are there a lot of narcissists and people that like to manipulate and play all kinds of mind games out there, but there's a lot of codependent enablers who are that's the kind of crap they're always saying. Well, don't blame your mother or your father, or just let it go, or just, it's water under the bridge, or it's not that big a deal, or just, and they're part of the problem, right? So that's why I don't like this idea that we shouldn't blame people who need to be blamed. It's just more BS, and as far as I'm concerned, it's more manipulation. So if you blame somebody in your life, my opinion is that's fine. We need to, part of the healing process, it's not a blame, and the other thing is blame has never prevented me from healing. Personally, I don't understand what a lot of these people are talking about. Like, I just don't. It hasn't prevented me from venting and healing and processing my trauma. It hasn't prevented me from, learning better communication skills. I don't know. I don't really get it. I think it's really confusing, especially for those of us who have been through narcissistic abuse. So while I think a lot of those people might be well intentioned by telling you not to blame somebody who actually did something wrong, what should be said first and foremost is you should validate what the person has experienced and been through, and acknowledge their pain, and maybe be some part of their healing process. It shouldn't be, oh, well, don't blame them. Like, don't blame that shouldn't be your first go-to. So, I think that's how a lot of people have functioned in our world for so long that they just don't know what else to say. But I think we should place blame where blame is due. And I think if you're blaming your narcissist, I think that's healthy, because that's the first step to dealing with what's actually happening, right? You know what I mean? Because otherwise, if you're not supposed to blame them, then it kind of sends you this message like, so are they not responsible for what they've done, or what are we really talking? It's so, you see how it's so confusing. It doesn't make any sense to me. So I would rather say blame them for what they did. You can work on your healing process. If you want to forgive them or not forgive them, or hold a grudge or not, that's completely up to you. But yeah, I think it's okay to blame your abuser. I know that might sound like a radical thing to say, but that's how I feel. That's That's been my experience. And I think it's empowering, because the narcissist wants you to think that the problem is you, right? That's what they want so badly. It's like, oh, well, it's just you. You got to just take responsibility for it. It's not that you shouldn't take responsibility for your life or anything, but, we're talking about abuse here. We're talking about extreme emotional and psychological abuse. And I think it's healthy to place blame where blame is due and not blame yourself. Because then you're like, oh, well, if I'm supposed to take responsibility, then maybe I just need to. And that's the trap we get into, right? The codependent types, or the people that are staying in unhealthy, toxic relationships. It's like, well, maybe, I guess if we're not supposed to blame them or hold them responsible, then I guess if it all falls back on me, then I guess I should just do something different or say something different. But it's not your fault, and you need to hear that. None of it was your fault. It's their fault. It really is their fault. That's why I'm also not a fan of that saying, like, when you point your finger at someone, there's 3 fingers pointed back at you. That has its place in life, but there are times where it really is someone else's fault. You know what I mean? There's times where, pointing your finger at someone is the right thing to do, right? It just doesn't make any, you know what I'm saying? So that's why I just like to keep it simple. Blame people for what they've done, to hurt you or to cause problems. Don't blame people for things that they didn't do, right? I mean, I know this sounds like overly simplistic thinking, but that's what has helped me to unwind my mind from all the gaslighting and BS from my own narcissist, and to also trust your own perceptions of reality, right? Because so many people, this is the dynamic I had with my mother and sister too, where my sister would always be like she knew the truth about our mother, like she saw it firsthand, the way she treated me. My mom was nasty towards my sister a lot of the times, but I was more the scapegoat. But my sister was always that, she was always like, oh, don't worry about it. Or she tried to, like, spin it around as somehow, like, it's my fault the way mom's behaving or something. It's such a weird thinking that, it was just very, honestly, it's painful and sort of hurtful when someone tries to make you seem like you're the problem when someone else is being abusive. There's no justification for abusive behavior. You know what I mean? And so, it's confusing, and it's when a lot of people are saying, and that's what happens in narcissistic family dynamics, is the scapegoat is usually kind of like dogpiled on by everyone else to keep the narrative going. The narrative of like, oh, well, you must be the problem, not the narcissist. And what's funny too is like they don't want you to blame them, but they don't have any problem blaming you. You see the BS? You see what I mean? Like even the people who are like, well, don't blame your parents, right? Those people are blaming you for blaming your parents. You see what I'm talking about? So that's why I'm not a big fan of a lot of people and their BS. I just think there's so much BS. It's very, especially if you're a kid or you're trying to grow up, you're like trying to trust your instincts and your perceptions of reality. It's like, people are just so full of crap. The narcissist is just one example, but It's just nonsense. It's just complete nonsense. No, my mom is blamed because of her horrible behavior, the pain and the damage she caused me. I work on forgiveness just so that it's like it's like a daily struggle. That's the hardest part about what I deal with now is just working. It's like all this anger and resentment inside me. I'm just processing and processing. I've gotten a lot out of me, but like, she doesn't piss me off as much as she once did. Like just internally, I'm able to process a lot of that stuff. But I don't think I'm ever gonna get to a point where I'm just like that was fine, no problem. Life, that's just life. Or some people are like, well, that's just your karma or whatever. It might be your karma, but it's also your karma to be validated and to heal from what's going on. And you also need to, and this is the kind of stuff that enables people to stay in toxic relationships and abusive relationships, is they're like, oh, well, I guess I need to just forgive or forget or not blame, or I should be the better person. And what ends up happening is they're just allowing themselves to be continually abused. But it would have been much easier if they just said, I'm blaming you, I'm pointing my finger at you, and there's 3 fingers pointed back at me, but that's because you're abusing me, and it's not okay, it's hurting me, and I'm getting away from you. It's not my fault, none of this is my fault or my problem, it's your problem, and I'm out of here. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not dealing with it. So, I can't tell you how many times I've had different family members like try to get me to come back to some narcissist. It's crazy, man. It's like, have you ever had that where it's like someone's like, hey, why don't you give grandma a call, or why don't you call mom, or just come back, or they try to play some little mind game or manipulate you, or try to make you feel guilty for not contacting a family member or something. And it's really weird. It's like, why? First of all, what's it to you? Why do you care whether I have a relationship with this person or not? And the second question is, how come you don't seem to, it doesn't bother you that this abusive, toxic person that everyone knows is toxic and abusive, I'm telling you, they're detrimental to my well-being, emotionally, psychologically. It's a really unhealthy, high conflict, combative, argumentative person. I don't want to be around them. So why would you want to try to force me to be around someone who's abusive? Don't you think that's kind of strange? These are the kinds of things I'll say in my families, like before anyway. Like I don't really see them anymore, but so they're not a big fan of me. But to me, it's real simple. I'm just not going to be around abuse. I mean, it's as simple as that. If you're going to act like a maniac and yell and scream and have terrible behavior, I'm just not going to be around you. I mean, if it's like those people that you say just relax. If they can't relax, then I'm gonna leave. Like if you can't control your behavior, then I'm not gonna be around you. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I've seen people that can control their own behavior, and don't be fooled into thinking that these people can't control their behavior. They can control their behavior. They just don't want to. They control it everywhere else, but they don't control it when it comes to you. You know what I mean? So anyway, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the topic of blame and, really empower you to blame your abuser for what they did to you. It's okay, right? And you can forgive them or not forgive them or whatever you want to do, like whatever is genuine for you. I'm much more interested in genuine feelings and genuine thoughts and genuine forgiveness and stuff like that, rather than just sort of pretending like everything's all right and pushing things down and suppressing your true feelings on things and you know what I mean? So if you're worried about blaming your abuser, don't worry about it. They're adults and they should not have been abusing you. Anyone, whether it's your parents or some husband or wife or whatever, whoever it is, it's not okay. And they do know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing. So, like my mom used to hit me a lot when I was younger, but once I got older and was taking martial arts and stopped her hitting me and stuff like that, she knew. It was like dealing with an animal, right? Like she knew what she was doing wasn't right. She knew it, and so she never hit me again because I stopped her. I just blocked her from hitting me. Like I didn't hit her or anything, but I blocked her hitting me. I'll never forget this. She was like, "Stop blocking me so I can hit you." I just can't believe it. Like I can't believe anyone would say that. Like a mother would say that. Like I shouldn't have to be blocking my own mother who's trying to whack me in the face or whatever the hell she was. She just came around the corner You know what I mean? Like a maniac. Oh my God. But she knew, like, and then once I started learning more about personality disorders and I had to deal with her, I could, her BS, I don't know if this is how it is for you, but she realized she could no longer abuse me. She just knew it. She knew she doesn't. It stopped. Like it didn't completely stop, but I could tell it. Like she knew she was caught, right? Like she knew, like her games, because I just put a sort of spotlight on all her manipulative behavior, and it just wasn't working anymore. Right? It was like, it used to be that she would just get me into an argument, but it got to the point where I became so adept at just, dealing with her. It was almost like psychological jujitsu or something. Like it just, everything she tried to do to me just wasn't working for her. You know what I mean? She didn't know what else to do. I've actually seen her like wig out because she didn't know what else to do. She's like, ah! And then she just like runs away. Like, it's like, just stop. I don't know if have you ever thought that about your narcissist? Just stop. Just calm down. Take a breath. You don't have to do anything. There's no problems here. There's no crisis going on. If you just stop and calm down, that you are the problem. Like, all this would stop. Like, Anyway, if you want to blame away. I give you the permission to blame, or whatever you want to do, But honestly, I think it's healthy to just look at what actually happened. And the thing is also, if you genuinely feel like you hate somebody, I think you should acknowledge that. I'm not saying you should act out on your hatred or something, or hold on to your hate. You can do whatever you want, but I just think it's better to be honest and to be open and maybe with someone else if you want, or again on a pen and paper, about your genuine feelings, right? Because that's how you're going to release your genuine feelings and your any hang-ups, and it's how you're going to reconnect to your core self, and that's how you're going to feel better no matter what's going on. So anyway, I hope you guys are doing well. I will see you guys in the next episode. I love you guys, and take care.